They thought no help was coming. Then a human warship answered the call. The command bridge of the Ethel diplomatic vessel, the Starlight Serenity, was a place of dying beauty. Once, the crystalline walls had glowed with a soft, internal luminescence, humming in harmony with the ship's systems. Now, they were cracked and dark, flickering with the erratic pulse of emergency power. The air, usually filled with the scent of ozonated water and biofiltered flora, was stale and thin. Outside the main viewport, the planet Kepler 186f was a canvas of silent horror. From this distance, the methodical destruction of Crystal Spire was perversely beautiful. Plumes of smoke and dust, glittering with pulverized crystal, rose from the surface to catch the light of the system's star. They painted the upper atmosphere in shades of bruised violet and blood red. Below, the jagged ships of the Cthar hung in the void like shards of obsidian, patient and monstrous. Ambassador Lyrael stood before the viewport. Her tall, slender form was silhouetted against the planetary chaos. Her people, the Ethel, were artisans and thinkers. Their culture was woven from light and harmony. They measured their worth in the complexity of a crystal sculpture or the elegance of a mathematical proof, not in the tonnage of their warships. She felt the weight of that philosophy crushing her now. Every life lost in the burning city below was a testament to her failure. It was she who had championed this remote colony. She who had promised the settlers a life of peace far from the machinations of the galactic core. Valerius, she said. Her voice a near whisper, yet it carried across the silent bridge. Report. The ship's chief engineer, Valerius, emerged from the shadows of a powerless console. His own bioluminescent skin, usually a vibrant sky blue, was now a pale, sickly gray. The primary life support is gone, Ambassador. The backups, they have perhaps 20 standard hours. The capacitor that powers the distress beacon is failing. We may only have 1 or 2 more broadcasts left in us. 20 hours. Lyrael closed her eyes, a gesture of profound grief. She could picture the faces of the colonists, the thousands of families huddled in the deep shelters beneath the city. They were trusting her. They were trusting in the very idea of civilization, in the belief that the galaxy would not simply allow 20,000 innocent souls to be extinguished. It was a trust she knew was misplaced. They had sent pleas to the galactic hegemony, whose patrols were meant to safeguard this sector. The response had been a cold, bureaucratic dismissal. Crystal Spire was outside their primary protection zone. A rescue fleet was not fiscally viable. They had contacted nearby trading outposts, only to be met with fear and pity. No one would risk the wrath of the Cthar. The Cthar did not parley. They consumed. They were a swarm, a plague of armored locusts that swept through the outer systems, stripping worlds of their resources and their people. They saw the Ethel's dedication to peace not as a noble philosophy, but as a weakness to be exploited, a sign that invited predation. Send the signal again, Lyrael commanded, turning from the window of sorrows. Her own guilt was a physical thing, a cold stone in her chest. She had led her people here, to this beautiful, doomed world. She had believed that reason and art could be a shield. How arrogant she had been. How naive. She watched as Valerius manipulated the controls, coaxing the last dregs of power from the dying ship. For a moment, a single, pure tone filled the bridge as the distress call was launched one final time into the uncaring void. It was a whisper of hope against a hurricane of despair. A hope she no longer believed in. The Cthar would begin their harvest soon. And when they did, the Ethel of Crystal Spire would face the end, alone on the command bridge of the Cthar flagship. The Ravager, the concept of beauty was alien. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and hot metal, a stark contrast to the delicate atmosphere of the Ethel vessel. Every surface was dark, non-reflective chitinous plating, designed for brutal functionality. There were no comforts, only stations for war. From his elevated command throne, War Captain Forlag surveyed the holographic display showing the burning colony below. He felt a deep, primal satisfaction, the same a predator feels when cornering its prey. The Ethel were so exquisitely fragile, so beautifully pathetic. Their destruction was not just a conquest. It was an affirmation of the natural order. The strong devour the weak. It was the only law the Cthar recognized. Subcommander, Forlag's voice rasped, a dry, clicking sound like stones grinding together. Status of the harvest. A smaller Cthar, its carapace marked with the red slashes of a junior officer, scurried to the throne. The surface defenses are neutralized, War Captain. The primary hive structures are fracturing under sonic bombardment, as you commanded. The prey is contained in their underground burrows. We are prepared to land the reaping swarms. Excellent, Forlag chittered. Standard protocol. Take half for the spawning pools and the flesh markets. Terminate the rest. I want there. Crystal spires ground to dust for industrial abrasives by the next cycle. The Ethel are weak, but their planet's bones are strong. He watched the tactical display as icons representing his troop carriers began their descent. To him, the Ethel were not people. They were a resource, a crop to be harvested. Their art, their culture, their lives, all were simply raw materials to fuel the relentless expansion of the Cthar hive. His communications officer interrupted the pleasant thought. War Captain, we are still detecting a faint, repeating signal from one of the orbital wrecks. Forlag waved a dismissive talon. The Ethel diplomatic ship. A distress call. Let it sing its sad song to the void. No one will answer. As you say, War Captain, the officer clicked dutifully. The Galactic hegemony has already denied their plea. The trade guilds fear our reputation. There is no one else in this sector. Of course not, Forlag sneered. The galaxy understands strength. They know this region belongs to us now. The Ethel chose a poor place to build their nest of glass. He settled back into his throne, imagining the screams of the colonists as his warriors broke into their shelters. Fear was the most delicious spice. The Ethel, with their delicate sensibilities and peaceful nature, would provide a feast of it. This easy conquest was almost boring, a simple administrative task of extermination and resource acquisition. He felt a pang of disappointment that they had offered so little resistance. A true hunt required a worthy struggle. These creatures simply lay down to die. Pathetic. He would be glad when the harvest was complete and they could move on to the next system, hoping for prey that might offer a more entertaining challenge. The bridge of the United Earth ship Vengeance was the antithesis of the Starlight Serenity. It was a cramped, brutalist space. It smelled of recycled air, strong coffee, and the faint, hot metal tang of overworked electronics. Every surface was scarred with the marks of hard use. Every console was built with a rugged, over-engineered simplicity that valued function over all else. The ship was a wolf. For its current clandestine survey mission deep in the Traverse, it wore the sheep's clothing of a battered tramp freighter, the Nomad. Captain Elias Thorne was nursing a lukewarm mug of coffee. His eyes scanned stellar cartography data projected on the main view screen. Their mission was simple. Chart unstable jump points, remain undetected, and report back. It was quiet, meticulous. Work, a far cry from his former life in the Colonial Marines. Captain, a voice cut through the low hum of the bridge. It was Communications Officer Anya Sharma, a young specialist with a preternatural gift for teasing signals from the cosmic background noise. I'm picking up a signal ghost. Faint, heavily degraded. Standard protocols would flag it as sensor noise, but you don't think it is. Thorne finished for her, not taking his eyes off the screen. Put it through the deep scan filter. Let's see what you've caught. Anya's fingers danced across her console. Boosting. Running decryption. It's a distress call, sir. Standard galactic code. But the carrier wave is unstable. Looks like their power is failing. Origin is Kepler 186f. Thorne straightened. On screen. The view screen flickered, the star chart replaced by a wavering audio signature. A voice, alien and melodic even through layers of static, filled the bridge. It spoke of an attack, of 20,000 innocents, of a final, hopeless plea for anyone, anywhere, to remember them. It was the voice of Ambassador Lyriel. Thorne listened, his expression hardening into a familiar, stony mask. He'd heard voices like that before. Odin, analyze, he said quietly. The ship's AI responded, its voice a calm, synthesized baritone. The signal originates from a non-allied system currently under assault by Cthar raiders. Based on known Cthar fleet composition and tactics, the probability of the colonists' survival is 0%. Probability of successful intervention by a single, unsupported vessel is 1.7%. Our mission parameters strictly forbid engagement or revealing our presence. Commander Eva Rostova, Thorn's first officer, stepped forward. She was a tall, severe woman whose adherence to regulations was legendary. Elias, Odin is right. Our mission is critical. We can't risk exposing a Vindicator-class vessel for a doomed colony. Thorn turned to face her, his gaze unwavering. Doomed because no one will help them. It's not our fight, Eva countered, her voice firm but not unkind. We can't save every lost soul in the galaxy. Our orders are to observe, not to intervene. Thorn was silent for a long moment. The Ethel's desperate plea echoed in the quiet of the bridge. He saw another face then, a memory that was never far from the surface. He saw a young colonist on Cygnus X-1, trapped behind a failing barricade. Her eyes were wide with terror as he was ordered to fall back. We can't save them all, his old commander had said. We have to follow the parameters. He had followed them then. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Parameters don't scream for help, Eva, Thorn said, his voice low and final. He turned to the helm. Navigator, lay in a course for Kepler 186F. Maximum burn. Odin, begin tactical analysis of Kthar fleet dispositions based on the broadcast. Find me a weakness. The AI paused for a fraction of a second. Acknowledged. Analysis initiated. Eva Rostova stared at him. A flicker of protest was in her eyes, but she knew that look on her captain's face. It was the look of a man who had drawn a line in the void. She gave a curt nod. Aye, Captain. I'll prep the crew for combat readiness. Thorn turned back to the view screen, which now showed a rapidly calculated jump vector. The Nomad was about to shed its skin. The wolf was going hunting. The Nomad dropped out of hyperspace with the jarring shudder characteristic of a civilian vessel pushed beyond its limits. It drifted into the Kepler 186F system. It was a solitary, unassuming ship against the backdrop of cosmic violence. Its hull was scarred and patched. Its silhouette was that of 1,000 other independent freighters plying the lonely trade routes of the Traverse. To the Kthar fleet, it looked like a gnat buzzing toward a Leviathan. On the bridge of the Ravager, Forlag sensor officer announced the new arrival. War Captain, a single vessel of unknown design has entered the system, broadcasting a standard human freighter identification code, Nomad. Forlag glanced at the tactical display. The icon for the human ship was laughably small next to his armada. A human, he rasped, a sound of dry amusement clicking in his throat. Lost, I presume. What business could a primate have this far from their filthy homeworld? He activated the fleet-wide comms. Ignore the new arrival. It is a meaningless insect. Proceed with the harvest. But the insect refused to be ignored. A communication request came through, patched directly to the Ravager's bridge. Intrigued, Forlag accepted. The calm, steady face of a human male appeared on his main screen. This is Captain Elias Thorn of the freighter Nomad, the human said, his voice devoid of fear. I am addressing the Kthar Fleet Command. You are in violation of the Galactic Hegemony's non-aggression pact regarding civilian colonies. I am ordering you to cease your attack and withdraw from this system immediately. For a moment, there was stunned silence on Forlag's bridge. Then, the Kthar War captain threw back his head. He let out a series of sharp, barking clicks that was his species' version of laughter. His officers joined in, their derision echoing through the brutalist command center. Ordering us? Forlag snarled, his amusement turning to contempt. You, in your pathetic little scrap hauler, are ordering the Kthar? Human, you have a boldness that exceeds your intelligence. Leave now, and I might allow you to live. Interfere, and I will hang your ship's scorched hull in my trophy hall. On the Starlight Serenity, Lyrael and her crew had been monitoring the exchange with a mixture of hope and terror. When she heard Forlag's threat, terror won. Human Captain, this is Ambassador Lyrael, she broadcast on an open channel, her voice strained with desperation. You cannot fight them. They will destroy you. Please, you must flee. Save yourself. Thorn's face remained impassive. Negative, Ambassador. No one's dying today if I can help it. He turned his gaze back to Forlag's image on the screen. That was your final warning, War Captain. You chose to ignore it. You have sealed your fleet's fate. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of the human was too much for Forlag to bear. His rage, a cold and precise thing, surged. He would not just destroy this human. He would make an example of him. He would tear the freighter apart piece by piece and broadcast the wreckage across the sector as a warning to any other upstart. Species. Destroyers Gortalone and Spinebreaker, Forlag commanded, his voice dripping with venom. Obliterate that freighter. I want nothing left but atoms. The two Cthar destroyers, each one a bristling fortress of armor and weapons that outclassed the Nomad in every conceivable metric, broke from the main formation. Their weapon ports glowed with nascent, deadly energy as they moved to intercept the human ship. On the Starlight Serenity's bridge, Lyrael covered her eyes. She was unable to watch the inevitable slaughter. Valerius and the others could only stare in horrified silence. The lone human, their impossible, suicidal savior, was about to be erased from existence. Why? Why would he throw his life away for strangers? It made no sense. It defied all logic that it was, she would later realize, an act of profound and terrifying. Humanity as the two Cthar destroyers locked onto the Nomad. Their main cannons unleashed synchronized blasts of incandescent plasma. The beams, thick as star freighters themselves, converged on the point in space where the human ship was, ready to vaporize it. But the Nomad wasn't there. In a move that defied both physics and the logic of any freighter captain, the ship didn't try to outrun the beams. It corkscrewed through them. The vessel rolled on an impossible axis. Its engines flared with a brilliance that was orders of magnitude beyond its class, threading a needle between two spears of stellar fire on the bridge of the Ravager, War. Captain Forlag watched the tactical display. His mandibles clicked in confusion. A lucky maneuver, he hissed. He cannot do it again. Destroyers, reacquire, and fire at will. But the ship they were targeting was no longer the Nomad. As it completed its roll, a symphony of metallic shrieks and hydraulic hisses echoed across the open comms channels. Ablative hull panels, scarred with the livery of a dozen fake shipping corporations, unlocked and jettisoned into space. They revealed a second skin of layered, non-reflective battleship armor. Cargo containers along its spine split open and retracted, not revealing holds for grain or machine parts, but exposing the heavily shielded barrels of kinetic railguns. Missile pods, flush-mounted and invisible moments before, now bristled from the ship's dorsal and ventral surfaces. The vessel's entire silhouette sharpened, becoming leaner, meaner, a predator shedding its disguise. The battered tramp freighter. Nomad was gone. In its place was the United Earthship Vengeance. All stations, report status. Captain Thorne's voice was a blade of ice in the sudden chaos. Railguns charged and locked, came the reply from his tactical officer. Plasma cannons cycling. Missile pods hot. Shields recalibrated to combat spec. Holding at 100%, reported Commander Rostova. Odin has tactical solutions. For the entire Cthar fleet, the AI added calmly. Execute, Thorne said, his command a single, sharp syllable. Before the Cthar destroyers could process the ship's metamorphosis, the Vengeance returned fire. It wasn't with the elegant energy. Beams of civilized warfare. It was a purely brutish, physical assault. The railguns fired, launching tungsten slugs at a measurable percentage of light speed. There was no bright flash, no warning, only a subtle distortion in space, and the instantaneous result. The shields of the Gortalone, designed to disperse energy, barely registered the physical impact before the solid metal rod tore through them. The projectile ripped through the destroyer's forward hull, passed through 3 decks, shattered its main power conduit, and exited through the aft engineering section. It left a perfectly round, molten tunnel in its wake. The Cthar ship went dark and silent, a tomb drifting in the void that on the Starlight Serenity. Ambassador Lyrael, who had been watching through the gaps in her fingers, lowered her hands. The raw, kinetic violence was horrifying, but it was a horror directed away from her people. Valerius, she breathed. What is that? The engineer stared at his sensor display. His pale skin flickered with disbelief. Its power signature. It's a warship. A heavy cruiser, by my estimation. It was hiding inside the freighter shell. The second destroyer, the Spinebreaker, seeing its consort neutralized, unleashed a full barrage of plasma bolts and concussion missiles. The Vengeance didn't try to dodge this time. It simply angled its prow toward the storm and absorbed the impacts. The layered armor glowed cherry red where the plasma hit, but it held. Point defense lasers, emerging from previously unseen turrets, stitched space with threads of light. They vaporized the incoming missiles before they could find their mark. They're inefficient, Commander Rostova noted with clinical detachment. They fire in predictable volleys. Their arrogance is their weakness, Thorn agreed. Target the spinebreaker's command bridge. Kinetic strike. Let's send a message to the war captain. The railgun fired again. The tungsten slug, a simple, stupid piece of metal propelled by unimaginable force, crossed the distance in a heartbeat. It struck the bridge of the spinebreaker. The entire forward section of the ship ceased to exist in a silent, blossoming cloud of shrapnel and frozen atmosphere. Aboard the Ravager, Forlag stared at the tactical display. His mind was unable to reconcile what his eyes were seeing. His destroyers, the pride of his raiding fleet, had been surgically dismantled in under a minute by a single, primitive human ship using what amounted to glorified space rocks. The amusement was gone. The rage was gone. All that was left was a cold, chilling confusion. This was not warfare as he knew it. This was extermination. The vengeance didn't pause. It accelerated, diving toward the local asteroid field, its engines leaving a trail of blue Cherenkov radiation. He's running, one of Forlag's officers shouted, a note of relief in his voice. No, Forlag whispered, a dreadful understanding dawning. He is not running. He is repositioning. He watched as the human ship wove through the field of rock and ice with an artist's precision. Then, it vanished. It was not a jump to hyperspace, but a flicker. It was there one moment, and gone the next. Tactical micro-jump. Odin's voice reported on the Vengeance's bridge. Re-emerging now. The human ship reappeared on the flank of the Cthar formation, where their shields were weakest. Before the hive mind could fully process the new threat. Vector, the railgun spoke again, crippling another Cthar vessel. On the bridge of the Starlight Serenity, the Ethel crew were no longer looking away in horror. They were transfixed. They watched the display with a terrifying, exhilarating awe. This lone human was a whirlwind of controlled chaos, a force of nature that had just been unleashed upon their tormentors. The fear they felt was still there, but now it was mingled with a ferocious, unfamiliar spark. It was the spark of hope. The Cthar fleet, once a model of unified, predatory grace, was now a fractured mess. Their hive mind, usually their greatest strength, became a liability. The shock and disbelief of their commanders cascaded through their shared consciousness. It sowed confusion and hesitation where there should have been a swift, coordinated response. Captain Thorn exploited this without mercy. He didn't just fight their ships. He fought their minds. Odin broadcast the Haka audio file on all Cthar frequencies. Thorn ordered, his voice dangerously level. Loop it. Maximum volume. Acknowledged, the AI replied, broadcasting ancient Terran martial performance chant. Suddenly, the Cthar comm network, usually a silent stream of telepathic data, was flooded with sound. It was a raw, primal noise. It was deep, guttural shouts, the rhythmic stomping of feet, the percussive slap of hands on flesh. It was the sound of 1,000 human warriors psyching themselves up for battle. It was a display of aggression so visceral it bypassed the Cthar's logical understanding of warfare and struck directly at their ancient, buried instincts. It was the sound of a predator challenging another for dominance that on the bridge of the Ravager, Forlag's officers flinched. Their antennae vibrated with the unfamiliar, hostile sound. What is that noise? His subcommander shrieked. Silence it. We cannot. The comms officer clicked back in panic. It is overriding our channels. While the Cthar were reeling from the psychological assault, the vengeance struck again. It appeared from the shadow of a crippled destroyer. Its plasma cannons spat white-hot energy that sliced through the unprepared shields of another Cthar vessel, crippling its weapons arrays. They are not warriors, Thorn said, more to himself than his crew. They are bullies. They only know how to fight when the enemy is afraid. Time to teach them what happens when the prey fights back. He opened a secure channel to the Starlight. Serenity. Ambassador Lyrael, do you read me? Lyrael, who had been watching the battle with a mixture of horror and awe, was startled by the direct address. We read you, Captain Thorn. We do not know how to thank you. You can thank me by staying alive. Thorn's voice came back, calm and steady as a rock in a hurricane. Your ship's main reactor, what is its peak theoretical output? The question was so unexpected it took her a moment to process. She turned to Valerius, who quickly accessed a flickering console. Its output is immense, Captain, the engineer stammered. Far beyond what is needed for a ship this size. It was designed for deep space terraforming research. Perfect, Thorne said. I'm sending you a bypass sequence for your reactor's safety governors. I need you to divert all non-essential power to the primary core. When I give the signal, you will vent the containment field for precisely 1.3 seconds. Do you understand? Captain, Valerius protested, his voice trembling. That would create an electromagnetic pulse of catastrophic magnitude. It could destroy our own systems. It is unsafe. War is unsafe, engineer, Thorne replied, his voice still unervingly calm even as the Vengeance shuddered from a near miss. The pulse will be directional, focused forward. Your rear systems will be shielded by the bulk of your own ship. The Cthar vessel off your port bow, however, will have a very bad day. Your choice, Ambassador. Lyrael looked at the Cthar destroyer that was beginning to turn its attention toward her own crippled ship. She looked at the faces of her crew, their initial awe now replaced with a dawning terror as they realized the battle was not yet won. The human was offering her a weapon. A dangerous, double-edged weapon, but a weapon nonetheless. For centuries, her people had believed that to wield a weapon was to become as savage as their enemies. But as she watched the Vengeance fight for them, bleed for them, a new understanding crystallized in her mind. Survival was not a passive state. It had to be claimed. It had to be fought for. Do it, Valerius, she ordered, her voice resonating with a newfound authority that surprised even herself. Follow the human's instructions. As Valerius worked, his hands flying across the console with a desperate urgency, Lyrael kept her eyes on the battle. The human ship was a master of violence, an artist of destruction. It used the Cthar's own predictable tactics against them, anticipating their moves, exploiting their weaknesses. It was terrifying to watch, but a part of her, a part she never knew existed, felt a fierce, burning pride. This creature of war was their creature of war. Ambassador, we are ready, Valerius announced, his hand hovering over the final control. Signal from the Vengeance. Anya Sharma's voice cut in on their private channel. The captain says, on my mark. Mark, now. Valerius, Lyrael commanded. The engineer slammed his hand down. The Starlight Serenity groaned as its reactor core was unleashed. A silent, invisible wave of pure energy erupted from its prow. It washed over the Cthar destroyer. The enemy ship's lights flickered and died. Its weapon ports went dark. Its engines sputtered into silence. It was dead in the water, a victim of its own superior technology, fried by Ethel scientists who had never fired a weapon in their lives. A wild, unfamiliar cheer went up on the Ethel bridge. For the first time, they were not victims. They were participants. They were survivors. The battle was broken. The Cthar fleet, once an organized terror, was now a scattered collection of crippled and fleeing ships. Their telepathic network, which should have been their greatest asset, was now a liability. It broadcasted waves of fear and confusion from one vessel to another. The human war chants, the impossible kinetic weapons, the inexplicable tactic of turning a science vessel into an EMP bomb, it was too much. The hive mind was fractured. Aboard the Ravager, Forlag watched his empire of fear crumble. His ship was heavily damaged, its crew disoriented. Of his mighty fleet, only a handful of ships remained combat effective. They were beginning to break formation. Their captain's survival instincts were overriding the war captain's authority. All was lost. The humiliation was a physical poison in his veins. He, Forlag, who had broken 50 worlds, was being defeated by a single, insane primate and a ship full of artists. It was unacceptable. If he was to be destroyed, he would not be destroyed alone. His rage coalesced into a single, final, spiteful command. All remaining power to the main engines, he shrieked at his terrified engineering crew. Set a collision course for the Ethel diplomatic vessel. We will take the architects of our shame with us to the void. The mighty Cthar flagship, trailing plasma and debris, began to turn. Its massive engines glowed with a final, desperate surge of power as it lumbered toward the wounded Starlight Serenity that on the bridge of the Vengeance. Alarms blared. Captain, the Ravager is on a collision course with the Starlight Serenity. Commander Rostova reported, her voice tight. The Ethel ship is too damaged to maneuver out of the way. Thorn's eyes narrowed as he watched the tactical display. Odin's calculations flashed on the screen. Impact in 90 seconds. Ethel vessel destruction probability, 100%. The Vengeance was also critically damaged. Its port engine was offline, and its hull integrity was compromised. It couldn't outrun the Ravager. Its weapons were too depleted to stop the charging behemoth. There was only one option left. It was the kind of hard choice a Marine learned to make when the line was about to break. Eva, Thorn said, his voice calm. Prep the bridge life pod for emergency ejection. Get yourself, Anya, and the rest of the bridge essential personnel in there. That's an order. Rostova stared at him, her usual stoicism cracking. Elias, no? What are you doing? Buying them time, he said simply. He turned to his navigator. Plot an intercept course. Put us directly between the Ravager and the Starlight Serenity. Sir, a collision will destroy us, the navigator protested. That's the point, Thorn replied grimly. He looked back at Rostova, his gaze softening for just a fraction of a second. Go, Eva. Your duty is to the crew. Mine is to the mission. The mission is to make sure those people survive. A tear traced a path through the grime on Rostova's cheek, but she was a soldier. She nodded sharply. Bridge crew, to the pod. Now, as his crew scrambled into the armored life pod, Thorn remained. At his command station, he opened a fleet-wide channel, his voice broadcasting into the chaos. Forlag, he said. You wanted a real fight. You got one. I will see you in the ninth hell, human. The Cthar captain screamed back. Thorn smiled faintly. See you there. He watched the indicator showing the life pod had successfully launched. Then he closed his eyes and whispered to the ship's AI. Odin, overload the primary reactor core. On my mark. Acknowledged, Captain. It has been an honor to don the bridge of the Starlight Serenity. Lyrael watched in absolute horror as the human warship, their savior, moved to place itself in the path of the charging Cthar flagship. No, she breathed, her hands pressed against the viewport. No, you can't. She saw the tiny spark of the life pod ejecting, a single soul cast adrift before the coming storm. Then the two warships met. The impact was silent, a slow, majestic collision of titans. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the Vengeance's core went critical. A new star was born in the Kepler system, a blinding sphere of white-hot energy that consumed both the human warship and the Cthar flagship in a single, silent instant. The shockwave, a ripple in space-time itself, washed over the Starlight Serenity. Its shields flared one last time before dying completely. When the light faded, there was nothing left. Just an expanding cloud of incandescent gas and molten metal. The battle was over. Forlag was gone. And so was the human captain who had saved them. Lyrael sank to her knees, a sob racking her slender frame. He had sacrificed himself. For them. For strangers. Her grief was interrupted by a single, hopeful beep from the communications console. Ambassador. Anya Sharma's voice, tinny and laced with static, came through the speaker. This is Officer Sharma of the US Vengeance. We have detected the captain's emergency beacon. He's alive. The surviving Cthar ships, their hive mind shattered, and their war captain, a rapidly cooling cloud of atoms, did not wait for an invitation to leave. They turned and fled into the dark of hyperspace, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. The battle for Crystal Spire was over. In the silence that followed, the bridge of the Starlight Serenity was filled with a dazed, almost sacred quiet. They had survived. It was the Ethel's own shuttle that retrieved the human life pod. Lyrael insisted on being part of the welcome party that met them at the docking bay. As the pod's hatch hissed open, a handful of human officers emerged. Their faces were bruised and smudged with soot, but their expressions radiated a grim satisfaction. The last one out was Captain Elias Thorn. In person, he was shorter than she expected, yet he possessed a presence, a stillness, that commanded the space around him. He moved with the coiled economy of a predator, a stark contrast to the graceful, flowing motions of her own people. Ambassador Lyrael, he said, his voice the same calm baritone she had heard over the comms. He gave a slight, formal nod. Glad to see you're all in one piece. Lyrael found her voice caught in her throat. She, a master diplomat who had negotiated treaties with a dozen species, was speechless. What could she possibly say to the being who had sacrificed his ship, his crew, and nearly his own life for her people? She settled for the simple truth. We would not be, Captain, were it not for you. The Ethel of Crystal Spire owe you a debt that can never be repaid. No debt, Thorn said simply. Just glad we got your call in time. It was at that moment that a new fleet of ships dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls gleaming and pristine. They were vessels of the Galactic Hegemony, the same power that had deemed her colony not fiscally viable to save. A channel opened, and the face of a Hegemony commander appeared on a nearby monitor. His expression was a mixture of awe and acute embarrassment. Ambassador Lyrael, Captain Thorn, the commander began, stumbling over his words. This is Commander Valerius of the HSS Vigilance. We detected a significant energy event and came to investigate. We had no idea. Thorn stepped forward, his gaze locking onto the Hegemony officers. You had a distress call, Commander. That should have been enough. The alien officer had the decency to look ashamed. You are correct, Captain. Our response was inadequate. The Hegemony formally apologizes to the people of Crystal Spire. He cleared his throat. We will be establishing a permanent defensive patrol in this sector to ensure this never happens again. Thorn nodded, then turned back to Lyrael, a silent question in his eyes. It was her colony, her decision. The offer was a clear admission of their failure, an attempt to save face, but it was also a promise of future safety. We accept your apology and your offer, Commander, Lyrael said, finding her diplomatic footing once more. We trust the Hegemony's commitment will be more robust in the future. The Hegemony commander nodded gratefully and signed off. As his image faded, Lyrael turned back to Thorn. The question that had been burning in her mind finally came out. Why? She asked, her voice soft. You owed us nothing. Your own government ordered you not to interfere. You risked everything for strangers. Why? Thorn looked past her. His gaze was distant, as if seeing battles fought long ago on worlds she could not imagine. Because on my world, Ambassador, we learned a long time ago that the only thing worse than a monster is a person who sees a monster hurting someone and does nothing. We heard someone calling for help. That made it our business. He met her gaze. Again, don't worry about repaying us. If you truly wish to show your gratitude, just pay it forward. If you ever see someone in trouble, someone the galaxy has decided isn't worth saving, you remember this day. You help them. In that moment, Lyrael finally understood the terrifying duality of humanity. They were not primitive. They were not chaotic. They were a species that had stared into the abyss of its own violent nature for millennia. They had emerged with a profound, unshakable code. They were capable of terrifying violence. Yes, but it was a violence wielded in the service of a fierce, unyielding compassion. They were the galaxy's monsters, and they were its saviors. Months later, the light of Kepler 186f's star shone down on a world being reborn. The scars on Crystal Spire were healing. With the help of the Hegemony Patrol and advanced reconstruction drones, the Crystal Spires were being regrown, the plazas cleared, the homes rebuilt. But the change was more than just physical. A new strength had taken root in the Ethel spirit. Ambassador Lyrael stood on an observation deck overlooking the colony's new orbital defense grid. The platforms were small and elegant, built with Ethel artistry, but they were based on simplified schematics provided by Elias Thorn's government. They were weapons, a concept her people had once abhorred. Now, she understood them for what they were, the tools necessary to protect peace. The resonance shielding is online, Ambassador, Valerius reported from a console nearby. The human designs are remarkably efficient. We are no longer defenseless. Lyrael nodded, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over her. They had learned the hard way that to be harmless was not the same as to be good. Goodness, she now knew, required the will and the means to stand against evil. As she watched the patrol ships weave their protective patterns in the void above, a soft chime emanated from Valerius' station. It was faint, almost lost in the background chatter. What is that? She asked. The engineer frowned, adjusting his sensors. It appears to be a signal fragment, Ambassador. Very distant, very weak. It's a distress call, originating from the Velis sector, a barely colonized system on the far edge of the Traverse. He brought the audio up, filtering out the static. A voice, frail and alien, spoke of raiders, of being abandoned, of a hope that was nearly extinguished. It was a song Lyrael knew by heart. A year ago, she would have listened with pity and sorrow and done nothing. She would have told herself it was too far, that they were too weak, that it was not their fight. But she was not the same person she had been a year ago. She had met a human. She remembered Thorn's words. They were as clear as if he were standing beside her. If you ever see someone in trouble, you help them. She turned to her engineer. Her eyes were alight with a fire that had been kindled in the desperate heat of battle. A fire that was wholly ethel, but forged by a human hand. Valerius, she said, her voice clear and absolute. Package all the data we have on the new defensive systems. The schematics, the power distribution models, everything. Transmit it to the source of that distress call on a priority, encrypted channel. Valerius stared at her, his mouth agape. Ambassador, that is proprietary hegemony technology. We are not authorized. We are authorized by our conscience. Lyrael interrupted, her voice ringing with newfound resolve. Send it. Now. As Valerius, a slow smile spreading across his face, complied, Lyrael stepped up to the main communications array herself. She keyed in the coordinates, opened a channel, and began to speak. Her words were a promise sent out into the vast, lonely darkness. Hold on, she said, her voice a beacon of strength and compassion. We are the Ethel of Crystal Spire. We hear you. Help is coming.